So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are officially recording, and we're going to jump in and finish our world history stuff for this week. Like I said before, yesterday, guys, it's going to be super important for us to stay on top of a few different things as we move on. We only have, realistically, a month of school left, which is absolutely insane. It goes by super quick in some points and then super slow in others, especially when you have to kind of chill at home and be kind of bored. But we're going to get through this together. We're going to work through, make sure everything's good to go, and check those boxes to make sure we're learning, we're getting our points, and doing all that stuff. Now, another reminder, remember earlier this week I walked you through what the no harm done grading looks like for GISH. Make sure you stay on top of that, and if you have any questions, let me know. But apart from that, guys, we don't have a ton of housekeeping stuff to talk about. Something I do want to remind you of is make sure you're getting your assignments in, even if they're late. Turn them in so you get the points. Because remember, with the no harm grading, anything you turn into me is going to effectively raise your grade. So this is a perfect opportunity for anyone that was like, hey, I absolutely want to get an A. This, if you do your online learning stuff, you're absolutely going to get an A. If you had anywhere below, or if you had anywhere above like a C minus, okay? Also, this is an awesome opportunity for you guys that might have been falling off the wagon a little bit and failing before we went on this whole COVID-19 break, because that means that you can bring your grade up from failing and you can pass my class and not have to worry about retaking world history, which is an awesome opportunity. So make sure you stay on top of that. Use your time wisely. Make sure you seize that opportunity and talk to me if you have any questions. All right? So
I do have a quick question.
What's your question, Daisy?
If you have like all A's or something, like, does anything actually really happen to your grades if you don't do anything?
So the only thing that could happen is that in GISH's grading policy, they have what they call professional discretion, which means a teacher has the discretion at the end of the year when it comes to like your final grade for the class. They can decide whether or not to bump you up. So like if you were only a few points away from passing and you demonstrated an effort that like you were going to pass, if we would have had one more assignment or whatever, teachers can bump you up. But in the same way, if you haven't demonstrated any effort and you still have like 100% in the class, teachers can choose to bump you down. Now that's just the professional discretion part. And you got to clear that with your teacher, right? So if you got a teacher that's going to be a stickler on that, then that's something that you probably want to talk about and want to address. But the e-learning stuff, the whole do no harm thing is surrounded upon the idea that everything you do helps you, okay, rather than hurt you. Do no harm. That's the whole idea behind it. So that's a good question. Talk to your teacher. Make sure you clear some things with them. And it's good to stay busy during this quarantine time. So, I mean, a lot of us have nothing better to do, so bumping up those grades is an awesome way to stay on top of some stuff. But good question.
Sleeping is better than coming to class.
I don't know. I mean, sleeping's pretty great, but there's a lot of time to sleep, and class isn't very long. So, I mean, that's what I'd say to that. But I'm excited that we have people chiming in here, and I've been seeing some really good participation in these next few weeks as we're kind of moving into this, the new grading policy. So make sure to stay on top of that, guys. So today, what we're going to do is, if you looked at the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about finishing up the Holocaust. We're going to finish out all the little details about what brings Hitler and the Nazis to this idea of the final solution. We're going to look at some pictures. We're going to see these different changes that happened within Germany. And then you're going to be cut loose to finish up a little Holocaust reflection assignment that I posted on Classroom. And that's going to be it for the week. We're going to have finished up the Holocaust, and then we'll finish up World War II next week and call it good. So make sure you stay on top of this and you're following along. Now, guys, as we begin, and we actually, well, I guess we're not beginning, as we finish our Holocaust discussion and we talk through this, what I want you to do is make sure you pull out whatever you've been using to keep track of this information, your notes, a Google Doc, whatever you've been using, right? So just pull out your notes, however you're doing that personally, to stay on top of it and get ready to go, all right? Because we're going to talk through where we left off and keep moving forward as we finish strong here for this unit. So let's see. Let's find the right thing here. There we go. Let's do this. Okay, so if you take a look at Classroom, guys, a little reminder, I post everything on here to let you know what's going on. So if you are ever wondering like, hey, I missed class, where can I find anything? Boom, I post the YouTube links literally the same day that we have class. So make sure you're taking advantage of this. I got a lot of people that email me and they're like, hey, Mr. Boyd, I don't know what assignments I need to do. A really easy way that you can take a look, boom, you click on classwork. There are all your assignments that we've done in this class. So you can just go through them piece by piece. Oh, did I turn this in? Let me click on it. Oh, I didn't turn it in. And so you go through and you do those different things. All right, this is the assignment we're going to do today, our Holocaust reflection. And we'll talk about what we need to do to make sure we are prepped and ready to go with that. So without further ado, let us do this. This thing stops loading. Oh, this thing's going to be a punk. Sorry, guys. It's not normally that horrible. Okay. So let's find, those are some images that we're going to look at for the Holocaust. For some reason, my stinking tab is hiding from me over here. Okay, so we're going to click out of that, and we're going to be ready to go. Goodness, we're struggling today. Come on. Finally. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you remember, we left off reading about the Holocaust. Then we walked through why the Jewish people were actually the victims of the Holocaust. We looked at some pictures from the Middle Ages. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about what finishes up this whole idea of the Holocaust. How did these things change the world and end up kind of at this final solution? So we talked about why the Jewish people were targeted, the first stages. We talked about Kristallnacht, okay? And where we left off is we said that after Kristallnacht, Germany was basically like, hey, we don't want you people here. And so a lot of Jewish people started looking to immigrate to other places. They were trying to go to the United States. They were trying to go to France. They were trying to go to Great Britain. They were trying to go anywhere other than Germany. And the problem is that a lot of other countries were so packed full and they were already in the throes of war that they weren't taking any Jewish refugees. Or they took some, but then they were full and they couldn't take them all because there were millions, guys. Millions and millions of Jewish refugees at the time. And so other countries weren't taking them. And so Hitler and the Nazi Party, they decide after Kristallnacht and after this whole immigration thing, he says, hey, I realize that I can't deport all of the Jewish people in this area. And so he started separating them from the rest of Germany into ghettos, essentially. And so they would take areas of a town and they would separate them off and they would fence them off. You can see it right here in this picture. And they would force all of the people that were Jewish that lived in a town or lived in a larger area into this one little spot, and they had to live together. And they had restricted rights. They had limited food options. They could not leave after a certain time period. And then eventually they lock these down and they say they can't leave at all. In fact, in some cases, what happens in ghettos is they completely seal it off and they just hope that the people inside, all of the Jewish people there in the ghetto, starve to death because they don't let any food in or out. No one is allowed to have a job outside or inside of the ghetto. And so they're just basically forced into this area to be left to die. Guys, the ghettos were really horrible places. And eventually we see this transition from ghettos to concentration camps. So Hitler starts by taking all of the Jewish people in an area and putting them in a certain spot where they have to live. And then, as things progress, Hitler decides to start sending them to places called concentration camps. Now, concentration camps and death camps are two slightly different things, all right, guys? Concentration camps or labor camps were built by the German population or the German soldiers to house and force Jewish people to work. So they would take people, remove them from the Jewish ghettos. They would take all of these Jewish people, usually put them on train cars, send them to these camps, and force them to work. And if they starved to death, if they caught diseases, if they died, if they needed people for science experiments, they would use those people, and they didn't care. They didn't view them as human. But the ultimate idea of those camps when they first started was to keep Jewish people separate and also use them and force them into labor. It wasn't to kill all Jewish people. Remember, the Nazis and Hitler, they don't come up with this final solution to have a mass genocide and kill all of these people until 1942. And so as the war goes on, we see Jews go from living in an area like they had the Nuremberg laws that restricted their rights, but they were still able to live in cities. Then they're put into ghettos. Then they're moved into concentration camps and forced to work, no matter their age, race, or sex, okay? And then, apart from that, that's when we see the movement towards the final solution, all right? So prisoners were forced to work. They were starved. They were beaten. If you see right here, this is actually a Jewish family being let out of a ghetto. They're being forced out of the ghetto to go board train cars to go to a concentration camp by German soldiers. Now, it's interesting when you actually take a look at the people that are committing this, because during this time period, we realize, guys, that Germany is at war. So being able to spare hundreds of thousands of soldiers to work in concentration camps, to go through and murder Jewish civilians, to force them out of ghettos and into other places, they use different types of soldiers. So these groups that like kind of came behind the conquered territories, like came behind the Blitzkrieg soldiers and enforced the law and really forced the Jewish people to do these things, they're called the Einsatzgruppen. They were usually older soldiers who weren't fit for war, but instead were forced to do atrocities or commit atrocities during the Holocaust. So these were the next steps. We see a movement from the Nuremberg laws to ghettos to concentration camps. And then here are a few images of concentration camps. This is the outside double fencing wall of a concentration camp. Notice it's got two barbed wire fences with a run in the middle, and then you have guard towers. The security on these things was absolutely serious. The idea is that they were going to force everyone to stay inside. If you take a look right here, this is a group of German Jewish prisoners that are being forced to wait until they're deported into a concentration camp. And see, they are already looking extremely sickly and downtrodden. They're being crammed into a tiny little space and forced to wait to go to these places where they're going to be forced to work. And then down here, you can see kind of what the barracks of a concentration camp would look like. You'd have hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people crammed into these tiny little barracks where you were forced to sleep on these tiered bunk beds with very, very poor hygiene, limited wardrobe, very few clothes and blankets. And guys, this is Germany. They have a rough winter. So it was really a horrible experience. And I don't think I need to tell you that. We teach you this over and over and over again, but we teach you it for a reason. So then this brings us to the final solution. That's what the Germans decide. They're going to call this idea that they're going to commit a mass genocide against the Jewish people. And they decide this because they want to figure out how to deal with what they call the Jewish problem. That's what they called the presence of Jewish people in the area. Remember, Hitler wanted to create a unified, strong, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan race, what he thought would be the perfect race to repopulate the world and the whole territories that Germany was going to take over. And so, because of that whole idea and because of the blame that he placed on the Jewish people, it was really emphasized that they needed to deal with the Jewish population in their area. And so in 1942, the Nazis decided how they were going to handle what they called the Jewish problem. That's when we see the construction and the building of Nazi death camps. And these were camps that were built specifically to not only house people, but with the ultimate goal of extermination, of killing anyone that came into that camp to try to deal with and bring down the Jewish population. So Nazi leaders decided on full-blown extermination. That's what they decided they needed to be happy. To actually fix the problem and be happy, they decided they were going to go with full-blown extermination. And so the Germans began constructing death camps in 1942. Most were actually open and operating, actively killing people until they were liberated by the Allies. So this was a really, really intense time period for the Germans in which they decide what they're going to do for the fate of their country, or whatever we see start to develop then. And so the Germans operate these death camps with the specific idea that they're going to take out the Jewish population, they're going to keep them down, they're going to be working against them, and they're going to try to solve this Jewish problem. Guys, these were horrible places. And you've heard of places like this: Auschwitz, Treblinka, Bergen-Belsen. One of the craziest things is that when you actually look at the location of Nazi death camps, not just concentration camps, there's a very odd pattern that you see in the fact that Hitler and the Nazi Party never constructed a Nazi death camp within the borders of Germany. They always built these death camps where they were going to send hundreds of thousands of Jewish people to their deaths. They built them outside of their borders. They put them in Poland. They put them in Austria. They put them in Russia. They put them all the way up over into the Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, okay? And so they never actually put Nazi death camps within the borders of Germany. And that's an interesting thing to look at, because it makes you question whether or not they actually thought that this is right, or they even wanted to be around it. But there was an obvious thing in which, by the time this final solution begins to be acted out, a lot of things were being kept secret from the German people as well. The German people chose to turn a blind eye and not really try to look for the truth, but at the same time, the government and of the Nazi Party in Germany was actively trying to make sure that no one was going to raise a fuss about these death camps. Now, that's not to say that there weren't concentration camps in Germany, because there were. There were labor camps and concentration camps, but no official Nazi death camps were actually within the borders. However, these Nazi death camps were just as atrocious. Inside camps, guys, Nazi officials would convince millions of Jewish people that they were either getting released or they were getting a shower, and they, in some cases, would take thousands of Jewish prisoners out into places that were basically like a forest or an open area. They dig a mass grave, and they would just gun every single one of the Jewish prisoners down and push them into a hole. That was one way that the Nazis started to take care of this extermination. Another way was something that was way more organized that happened at these death camps, in which they tried to develop an effective way of killing millions of people, if you can think of such a thing. And so they would convince them that they were going to get a shower. You've probably heard this story before. They would force them to strip completely naked, take all of their valuables, all of their clothes, push them into these chambers like this down here. This is actually the shower chamber at Auschwitz. It was just one of the gassing chambers. And then from the ceiling and through the shower heads, or what would look like shower heads, they would dump a chemical known as Zyklon B that killed everyone inside within a matter of minutes. So this picture right here is an actual death chamber, what they called. They tried to call a shower in Auschwitz. And then over here, this is a picture that I included because it kind of gives you perspective of how many people were killed. This is the Holocaust Museum that's now at Auschwitz in Austria. You can still go and visit Auschwitz, guys. They've kept it open so that you can go and you can see just how crazy this was. These were all of the shoes, all of the pairs of shoes that were taken from Jewish prisoners before they were led to their death and extermination at this Nazi death camp in Auschwitz. And if you look, it is incredibly tough to see, but in the background, there are just piles, millions and millions of shoes. And not only that, but they would take all of the valuables that they could get their hands on and steal it from the Jewish people. Now, ultimately, what was the final toll? So to bring this all around, guys, let's take a look. Finally, when we actually talk about what's going on with this whole thing, all right, once the Holocaust was finished, it killed over 6 million Jewish people. But guys, the Holocaust just didn't kill Jewish people. Another 4 million Christians, Poles, Roma people, okay, Slavs, and homosexuals were also killed. Remember, the Germans focused in on the people that were different from them. Those were the people that they blamed for this. Those are the people that didn't fit into the perfect puzzle piece of the Aryan race. And so that's why they were actually persecuted, they were thrown into these death camps, and they were killed. So there were 10 million people killed by the Nazi regime in these death camps. Some camps alone, guys, could kill over 6,000 people in a day. So I showed you that picture of the shoes on the last slide. This right here is a picture of all of the wedding rings that were confiscated and taken from Jewish prisoners before they were led to their death. It's absolutely insane when you think about just how crazy the number of people that were forced to their death were. Over here, we see the excavation of a mass grave. Remember I said that sometimes, in order to kill a huge amount of people, they would just dig a giant hole, line up thousands of people in front of them, and just gun them down and push them into the hole and then just bury it. This is the result of that. People have gone back and they actually went through and excavated one of those mass graves. And you can see there's a few skulls, but this is just a pile of bones. No identification, no idea which belongs to who. It's absolutely crazy the impact this has. In areas like Poland, guys, something to drive this home. In areas like Poland, only 15% of the entire Jewish population actually survived. So out of the Jewish population of 3.5 million or whatever that was in Poland, only 15% of that survived this when we talk about the Holocaust. So the final toll was enormous. It was horrible. It left a lasting impact. And it should and will never be forgotten. Now, when we talk about the end of the war next week, we'll talk about how the Allies discover these concentration camps as they're liberating Germany and some of the different things that apply to that. But it's absolutely insane what we can garner, what we can learn, and just how horrible this piece of history was. But it's a huge part of World War II. So now that we know the final toll, we understand how this whole thing worked, from Nuremberg laws to ghettos to concentration camps to death camps to the final absolute solution was Zyklon B. We understand that this was a cohesive idea that they were going to eliminate a group of people. Now, in order to reinforce that idea, what I want to do is I want you to reflect a little bit on the Holocaust. And so that's why I created the assignment that we have actually posted in Classroom. So guys, if you look at Classroom, posted on our class stream, you'll see that I have a little assignment that says Holocaust Reflection. There are 3 short answer questions that I ask you. I want to know, in your own words, what the Holocaust was and why the Jews were targeted. Okay. I also ask you, hey, why do you think the Germans went along with this and didn't think it was wrong? And then finally, I say, how do you think we can prevent things like this by learning about them? So I want you to reflect, think a little deeply, and type me out a few responses so that I know you're alive, you're participating, and you're thinking about this kind of crazy time period that we need to address because it's real, it's somber, and it's a huge part of history. So make sure you stay on top of that. That's how we're going to finish out today. Get that assignment done. Make sure it's good to go. It's due on Saturday at midnight. We have all of our notes done for the Holocaust, and then next week, we're going to finish up World War II, and we're going to be done with this unit. So guys, make sure you stay on top of this stuff. Does anyone have any questions before we end today's class?
No.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for showing up. Thanks for participating. Work hard. I will see you. If you want to show up to my office hours on Thursday or Friday, I could see you then. If not, I will see you on Monday at 11 so that we can talk about the end of World War II.